I lived in a modest village in southern England, one of those properties inherited from father to son, all stone, lined with small windows and rain-worn roofs. My house, was one of the simplest, cramped, damp, smelling of old firewood and stale bread. But it was there that my husband, Thomas, and I lived our simple life. And despite the hardships, we had each other, or so I thought at the time. One spring, construction began on a neighboring property. The old barn that occupied the land was demolished in a matter of weeks, giving way to something never before seen in those parts. A veritable neoclassical mansion, with tall columns, an interior garden, ornate fountains, and a veranda that looked like something out of a French painting. The contrast with our village was almost offensive. From my kitchen window, I watched every detail being built, imagining what kind of refined family would come to inhabit that house. But when the resident finally arrived, he was neither family nor typical of refinement. He was a gentleman. A dark-skinned man, strong and proud, always dressed in impeccable linen suits and shoes that gleamed even on cloudy mornings. His name was Mr. Joaquim d'Almeida. They said he came from Angola and owned lands in distant colonies as well as commercial interests in Europe. But he lived completely alone. No one visited him, no sounds of celebration, no laughter in the hallways, only the sound of the wind through the newly planted palm trees and his slow footsteps on the stone floor. Sometimes I even felt a pang of pity. It was an empty palace for a silent man, and I, with so little, still had Thomas's warmth, our shared bread, and our naps together on the worn sofa. One night, leaning over the kitchen sink with my hands immersed in the hot, soapy water, I looked out the window and saw Mr. Joaquim crossing the garden with a book under his arm. I turned to Thomas and, without much thought, blurted out, "What if I asked our neighbor for a job?" He put down the newspaper and arched an eyebrow. "Work? At the Manor? He lives alone. Maybe he needs a maid, someone to keep everything in order. We could use some extra change. The bills got tight again this month." Thomas grumbled. He was a proud man, the kind who believes a woman should only take care of the house. But our cupboards were as empty as our savings. After much arguing, he finally relented with a weary sigh. The next day, I put on my most modest dress, tied my hair in a simple bun, and walked to the estate's twisted iron gates. My heart beat like a war drum. I was greeted by him himself. Joaquim looked me up and down, his expression unreadable. I explained that I was his neighbor, that I needed work, and that perhaps I could help him with the household chores, cooking, sewing, organizing the rooms. For a moment, I thought he would refuse, but then his dark eyes softened. "Come in, let's talk." The house inside was even more impressive. Carved wooden ceiling, blue velvet curtains, paintings by artists I'd only heard about. There was a scent of lavender and noble tobacco in the air. But above all, a dense loneliness hung, as if the beauty of the place served only to hide the emptiness. We talked for a while. He listened to me attentively, his fingers drumming on the rim of a glass of dark wine. He said he didn't need any help, but that if I was truly willing, we could try for a few days. I accepted immediately. I returned home with a smile that almost escaped through the window. I told Thomas everything, as excited as a girl who just discovered a secret garden. He listened quietly, but his eyes were filled with thought. "And the house?" he finally asked. "Is it what they say?" "It's more. It's a whole world, Tom. He has a marble bathroom, windows that open onto the conservatory, and a library that smells of leather and secrets." He nodded, but his gaze grew distant. I had the impression my description had awakened something in him. Maybe it was just the surprise of imagining so much luxury alongside our simplicity. Or maybe something more. I started the next day. I worked from sunrise to sunset, cleaning staircases, polishing silverware, refreshing flower arrangements that he didn't even comment on. Joaquim was discreet but kind. He spoke little, though sometimes he would let slip memories of his homeland, golden beaches, vast sugarcane fields, nights lulled to the sound of drums. And I listened to it all in silence, absorbing every word like someone reading a forbidden novel. I returned home exhausted, but strangely light. The money he paid me already made a difference. And I was beginning to feel a certain pride for the first time. I was supporting part of our household with my own sweat. Thomas noticed my excitement. At first, he only asked about the house. But then, his questions began to revolve around the master. What he ate, if he received letters, if his rooms were locked, if he looked me in the eye. I thought it was just silly curiosity, but something told me there was more to that uneasiness. One night, after dinner, we plopped down on the couch, just like we used to. The fire crackled in the fireplace, and, sensing he was acting strangely, I dared ask, "Thomas, what goes through your head when I talk about Mr. Joachim?" He stared at me silently for several seconds. I thought he was going to make some joke, but instead, he said something that made my blood run cold. "If you, like me, were also chilled by this ending, then just wait until you see what the next chapter brings. This story is just beginning, and I promise you the twists and turns will leave you speechless if you know what I mean." Take advantage and subscribe to the channel and leave that smart like, because here the romance is hot, elegant, and full of secrets. "Perhaps you could win over Mr. Joachim," Thomas said, fixing me with a look more serious than I'd ever seen. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. I stared at him silently, unable to believe what I'd just heard. This couldn't be real. My own husband. Suggesting I make advances to another man? "Are you joking, Thomas?" I whispered, my throat as dry as the attic air. "I'm serious, woman," he insisted, leaning against the edge of the fireplace. "Men like him, rich and alone, like to please. And you. You're beautiful, Esme. A rare beauty. I'm sure the old man wouldn't resist. He could shower you with gifts, perhaps even help us with money." That made my stomach churn. The man with whom I'd shared bed, board, and dreams for so many years now offered me up as if I were a bargaining chip. I felt betrayed, lost, as if the world had suddenly turned against me. "Are you really suggesting that I seduce Mr. Joachim, as if I were some kind of concubine?" He chuckled, trying to lighten the weight of his words. "That's not it, Esme. I'm not telling you to give yourself up right away. Just play it cool, create opportunities, use your wits. If he falls, great. If not, no one's lost anything. Think about it. You said he seems lonely, didn't you?" I turned my face away, feeling the heat rise to my face. The worst part was that, deep down, part of me understood his desperation. We were drowning in bills. The house needed renovations, and Thomas, though proud, could no longer find steady work on the neighboring farms. But this? For days, the proposal hammered in my head like an old clock that refused to stop. I kept going to Mr. Joachim's mansion, diligently doing my chores, but each step I took felt different. I began to notice the way he looked at me, the way his eyes lingered a second longer on my skin, and, against my will, I began to consider the plan. It was on a rainy night that I made my decision. We sat at the wooden table with stale bread and thin soup, and I said to Thomas in a firm voice, "If I'm going to do this, I'll do it my way. No vulgarity, no pressure. If anything happens, it will be because I chose it." He nodded. With a tight smile, she opened a small wooden box where we kept our last coins and gave me what was left. Enough to buy a new dress, something that would draw attention without seeming immodest. "Make it count," she murmured. "We're counting on you." The next day, I wore the piece I'd had tailored by Madame Violette, a French dressmaker who lived in the city. A fitted dress in dark fabric that accentuated my curves and highlighted my waist. The neckline was daring, yet elegant. I tied my hair in a slightly undone bun, exposing my neck, and applied a light blush to my lips, subtle yet provocative. I walked to the mansion with trembling legs, but as soon as he opened the door, I felt something different. Mr. Joachim's gaze lingered on me in a way he'd never seen before. His dark eyes sparkled, and he gave me a discreet smile, as if he'd noticed something but preferred to keep it to himself. "You look stunning this morning, Madame Esme." "Thank you, sir. It's just a new phase," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. That day passed like any other, but the mood in the air was different. As I swept the hallways, her footsteps followed me silently. As I dusted the furniture, our fingers almost touched. And as I arranged the books in the library, I felt her scent mingle with mine. It was as if we were dancing an invisible waltz, each movement a restrained attempt at rapprochement. As the days passed, my gestures became more subtle, an extra glance, a whispered compliment, a lingering smile, and he responded with the same restrained intensity. He began to compliment my work more frequently. He commented on my intelligence, my posture, my delicate and refined way of walking. Until one foggy afternoon, he surprised me. He had a box in his hands. His gaze held a mixture of charm and mystery. "I have something for you, Esme. Go up to the guest room and try it on. Then come back and tell me if it fits." Heart pounding, I climbed the marble stairs as if walking on clouds. I closed the door behind me and opened the box. Inside lay a pure silk dress in a deep wine hue. The garment was light as the wind and soft as the night. Its transparency suggested more than it hid, and the cut boldly hugged my every curve. As I put it on, I saw in the mirror a woman I'd never met. Seductive, firm, powerful, a body ready to awaken desire, a gaze that challenged and enchanted at the same time. I descended the stairs with my heart ablaze, and, upon reaching the living room, Mr. Joachim slowly turned around. His eyes devoured me from head to toe, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still again. "Wonderful," he murmured. "It's absolutely perfect." I felt a blush rise to my face, but I didn't look away. The game had begun, and I was more into it than I'd ever imagined. That afternoon, the air seemed thicker, charged with something invisible and incandescent. And in that golden hall, under the gazes that said more than words, I realized the line between duty and desire was beginning to blur, slowly, dangerously, deliciously. Did you also feel the heat rising on the other side? Because I confess that reliving that part left me breathless. Now tell me, what would you do in my place? Did my husband overstep his bounds, or was he just trying to find a way out? Write here in the comments. I really want to hear your opinion. And don't forget to leave that naughty like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hurry up, because the third chapter is coming. And it's simply explosive. The weeks that followed that first touch were like a whirlwind of sensations. With each day at the mansion, I delved deeper into that forbidden relationship. Mr. Joachim, as he called himself, made a point of showering me with gifts. Perfumes from Marseille, mother-of-pearl necklaces said to come from South Africa, and silk dresses that felt more like caresses on my skin. He knew exactly what to say. His eyes, dark as night, enveloped me with promises of a better life, a life without debt, without fear. And I, blinded by desire and deluded by hope, believed. Or pretended to believe. At home, my husband, Thomas, remained under the illusion that it was all just a temporary ploy, that I was playing a role. But over time, the role began to consume me until I no longer knew where the farce began and where I had truly lost myself. With each encounter with Joachim, I was stripped not just of my clothes, but of all my sanity. The sheets of that mansion became the stage for scenes I would never dare tell anyone. He knew my body as if it were made for him. He knew the exact moment to touch, to stop, to torture me with desire until I begged for more. But as intense as the pleasure was, there was something in his gaze that unsettled me, a shadow that went beyond the seductive mystery. It was as if he were hiding something, a secret greater than any we'd ever shared, between hushed whispers and hungry kisses. It was one rainy morning, upon arriving at the mansion, that everything changed. I rang the bell at the main gate as usual, but instead of Joachim himself, a middle-aged woman appeared at the entrance, wrapped in a brown overcoat and wide-brimmed hat. Her gaze was suspicious, almost stern. "Yes, ma'am?" he asked with a slight accent from the countryside of Minas Gerais. "I came for my daily chores. Mr. Joachim usually leaves the door unlocked when I'm late." She arched an eyebrow. "Joachim? My dear, who is Joachim?" "The owner of the house," I replied, confused. "He hired me a little over 2 months ago. He said he was alone and needed help maintaining the property." The woman let out a humorless laugh. "Ma'am, Mr. Joachim doesn't own anything. This house is mine. He was just looking after it while I was taking care of business at court. He was my cousin on my father's side. I left him here out of charity. He was out of work, and I thought he'd do me the favor of keeping everything in order. Apparently, I was wrong." I froze. My heart raced as if I were about to faint. "And where is he?" I asked, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. "He left yesterday, with a ticket I paid for myself. He said he was going back to Luanda. He had no more room here and no use for it." "But he said he was the owner." My voice trailed off. The woman looked at me with pity in her eyes. "My daughter, that man didn't even have his own shoes. The clothes he wore were all my donations, and the jewelry he gave, all fake jewelry. Those perfumes, probably cheap items bought at the port." It was like being slapped. My face burned with shame. The intimate scenes came rushing back to me. The kisses, the touches, the whispers, the passionate sighs, all of it for a ruse. A man who used his sweet tongue to take advantage of a desperate woman. A fraud. I walked home without feeling my own footsteps. The noise of the carriages and the tinkling of the church bells seemed distant, unreal. My body still bore the marks of pleasure, but now every memory felt dirty, as if I'd been used. I entered through the back door, trying not to make a sound. Thomas was sitting in the kitchen, the kettle still on. His eyes met mine, and I noticed the heavy silence in the air. "He left you, didn't he?" he said bluntly, as if he already knew. "How?" "The servant on the corner told me the lady of the house came back. She said she sent that Joachim guy away yesterday, and that you were going there every day." I felt the ground disappear again, but there were no more tears, only emptiness and shame. "I thought you were doing this for us, to save our home, our lives." He sighed, leaning his elbows on the table. "And was it worth it?" I closed my eyes. I remembered every touch, every promise, every whisper between cheap satin sheets. Number, I was deceived, like a fool. He stood up. He looked at me with the same look he'd given me when we said our vows years ago in the neighborhood chapel. "I made a mistake too. I shouldn't have let you do that. We were weak, both of us, and now we pay the price." Silence. But in that moment, I realized something. Even after everything, he was still there. Steadfast, fated perhaps, but mine. I approached slowly, our hands touched, and, strange as it may seem, there was still warmth. Maybe love isn't a straight line. Maybe it goes through twists and turns, lies, falls, and humiliations. But if there's something left, something true, maybe it can still be rebuilt. Oh, my friends, and so ends this story. If you've made it this far, comment where you're watching from. I love hearing how far the story has gone. Now tell me, do you think she deserved this punishment? Or was the real culprit that Joachim, the fake owner of the mansion? And you, have you ever fallen for one of these con men? Comment below, I want to read it all. Don't forget to leave that naughty like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos, because there are more hot, engaging, and twist-filled stories to come. See you in the next video.